So you're about to audit receivables and revenues. It's a great day to be an auditor. So as you do this, you're thinking about what is most important in this area. Where do I need to focus my attention? And we can make that determination of where to invest our time by thinking about the relevant assertions that relate to receivables and revenues. And the first assertion I think about in this area is that of existence for receivables. And then the second one I think about is that of occurrence for revenues. Many times management will fraudulently juice up net income by recording receivables that don't exist and recording revenues that don't exist. As a matter of fact, the audit standards tell us that we should presume that there's an overstatement of revenues unless we can rebut that presumption. Now, the reason the Auditing Standards Board placed that requirement in the audit standards is they know that this potential for fraudulent receivables and fraudulent revenues is quite possible. And so the two assertions that you want to think about from the very get-go is existence on the receivables and occurrence in relation to revenues. Now, another assertion that's really important is that of valuation. If your client has a $20 million balance in receivables, we know that most of the time they're not going to collect all of that $20 million. They might, for example, collect only $19 million. So usually the client will record what's called an allowance for uncollectible amount, and let's say that this allowance is $1 million. This is an offset to the receivable account. It's what we call a Contra Account. We want to make sure that that allowance is valued correctly. The reason being, management can play with this estimate, and this is an estimate. They could play with this allowance in order to increase their net income. So how this works is if management desires to manipulate their earnings, they would decrease this allowance for uncollectible, and by doing so they increase their net income. The valuation assertion is critical as we look at receivables. Now, those are the three assertions that I primarily think about: existence, occurrence, and valuation. Now, if there was another that I would add, it would be cutoff. And so in the audit standards, they're telling us you want to make sure there's not an overstatement of revenues. Let's suppose that management would like to record additional revenues so they don't cut off the books at year end. And let's say that this client is a calendar year end entity, and so they allow, say, the first week of revenues in January to be recorded in December. They don't have a clean cutoff. So we want to make sure that there is a clean cutoff. Now, what this means is another assertion that quite often comes into play for receivables is that of cutoff. So I'll summarize by saying the assertions that I think about most often are existence in relation to receivables, occurrence in relation to revenues, valuation in relation to receivables, and then oftentimes I'll think about cutoff in relation to receivables as well. So think about these assertions as you plan to perform your audit of receivables and revenues. Hope it goes well for you.